Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, out here to share with you my recent visit to Q. I originally ended up back east in New Hampshire. I was going to take a class with Kyle Lamb over at the SIG Academy years ago in like 2017. And that's where I originally ended up running into, meeting Kevin, Ethan, Nick, like the whole gang over at Q. And since then, I'd visited them like over the next year or two. And then I just hadn't made it back there for years. And I knew in that time they had actually moved to a different location, because before it was basically just one building and yeah, basically a giant shared open workspace with all, I think, original like 12 or 15 employees or something like that, like a handful of people there. And then the other side was largely like assembly, some different machines, wire EDM, like all that stuff, but largely just all one building. And so fast forward to 2023, and yeah, I was back east, got to stop in and check things out. As I mentioned, originally it was just that one big building and everything was in there. Now there's two different buildings, both of them pretty big. And so in the one building you have like the entire engineering team, which is really cool. One, bunch of just good guys, but two, like I really like just talking to engineers because they nerd out on really cool stuff that I find fascinating. And it's one of those where like, hey, here's this problem, like how are we going to fix it? And basically problem solving on like a mechanical level, and really neat. Not to mention looking around there, it's like the workshop from Q in the old James Bond movies, where yeah, you just have all this rad prototype, like half done, maybe this is a little further along, all kinds of cool stuff in different various stages of being brought to market, to include the boombox, which is super cool. And yeah, really cool getting to check that stuff out there. And there's now an entire massive like manufacturing section, which is really neat to see. Basically all the stages of everything, whether it's silencers like getting welded or in just various stages before they're actually like pressed together, things like that. Not to mention pretty amazing new welding machine versus like the olden days when I actually welded my can up, my trash pan I made a long time ago. Really neat to see that kind of move along. And then all of the basically assembly. And so working through all the different, whether it's sugar weasels, honey badgers, fixed rifles, all that stuff. Just racks and racks of guns, like as they're building everything out. Now there are so many more machines. Like there was like one or two machines, but one was like an old lathe, which I think is still over there for the engineers to like one-off stuff, but pretty neat. Like just different parts getting produced. And it's one of those two where Q approaches things as far as like, hey, like what can a vendor source for us? Or can we source through a vendor? And then, hey, what can't they make because they either can't keep our tolerances or they just are unable to produce it because of whatever other limitations. And they're like, cool, we will make that. And so they will make certain things in-house that they can't or don't want to rely on vendors for, largely because of QC and stuff like that. And yeah, being able to just crank stuff out, it's pretty cool. And they now have a pretty neat, basically 3D printing machine that's printing in metal. And that whole process is pretty wild, like the actual machines themselves and how that stuff works. And it's a pretty long turnaround process, like days basically, because then it has to go into essentially, I think, like a special kiln where it gets fired and kind of everything fuses together, and then they pull those parts out. And there's a pretty wild like AI learning side to making those prints, which which I think is also really interesting, where you'll basically scan whatever you made back into the computer and be like, hey, when we made it last time, this is how it came out. That's not how we want it. And the computer will be like, oh, we'll try putting a support here, or like fill in the blank, to where they will basically adjust what it is that you put in there so that it comes out the way you want it to because of material sag and all these other things. Pretty wild. Overall, just an amazing facility, and I actually caught it like kind of right at lunchtime, so talked to a number of the people there, and pretty cool, like reminiscent of the old days at Q, where yeah, people show up because they want to show up and just get to do cool stuff, like build cool guns. So it was pretty neat. But then why not go to the range if I'm out there? And while I love shooting 5.56, something I hadn't had the opportunity to shoot in a number of years, which is 8.6 Blackout. Incredible cartridge. So, got to do some shooting with that to include in the new boombox.
That's the world's first prototype. If only we had fixtures.
And of course, to really appreciate how quiet that round is, shooting it out of the fix also. So much fun. Dinner bell. Towards the end, we were working on basically firing around, getting your second round off before the first one impacted down there at, I don't know, 350 or whatever it was, which it was hard to do. And Drew talked a big game and then failed. I'm pretty sure he said he was going to eat his shoe, which I haven't seen him do that yet.
Oh for 2. Fuck.
You guys could share the shoe.
It's harder than it looks.
Nick didn't talk as much shit as I did.
Yeah, I didn't talk any shit actually.
Fair. All in all, it was an awesome trip out there. Definitely appreciate just watching it kind of grow. As I mentioned, the first time I met all those guys was in like 2017, and there was, I don't know, like less than 20 employees at that point, most of them degreed engineers, and now just watching it expand, like still having a big engineering team, but watching just kind of the production side of it grow, not to mention just facility side. Pretty neat. But yeah, had a rad time out there and grateful for the opportunity. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadge.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.